Flight attendant kicks elderly black woman off plane, not knowing she owns the airline. She was merely an elderly woman, settling into her first-class seat, hoping for nothing more than a tranquil flight. But within moments, a flight attendant loomed over her, eyes icy and voice cutting. "You need to move. First class isn't for you." The woman attempted to share her ticket, her proof of belonging, but the attendant dismissed her entirely, not even sparing a glance. Just 5 minutes later, it was the woman who was being escorted off the plane. In those fleeting moments, an ordinary flight spiraled into a national scandal, and by the time they touched down, one career lay in ruins. Before we dive into the story, I invite you to share where in the world you're tuning in from today. If tales like this resonate with you, please hit that subscribe button so you can always be part of our journey. She clutched the handle of her small suitcase, her fingers pressing into the well-loved leather as she entered the airport terminal. The gentle murmur of conversations, the rhythmic roll of luggage wheels against the gleaming floors, and the faint crackle of announcements enveloped her. Evelyn Harris, a retired schoolteacher in her late 70s, had embarked on yet another adventure. She had done this plenty of times before, but today felt profoundly different. Perhaps it was the thrill of reuniting with her granddaughter after so many long years, or maybe it was the heavy passage of time settling into her bones. Regardless, she was ready to board her flight and sink into the seat she had eagerly paid for. Approaching the check-in counter, she handed her ticket to the agent, a young woman whose polite yet hurried demeanor reflected the bustling atmosphere. The woman scanned the ticket, nodded, and offered a fleeting smile. "You're all set, Miss Hale. First-class boarding will begin soon. Enjoy your flight." A quiet sense of pride swelled within her, nestled in Eudora's heart as she gently tucked the ticket back into her purse. First class. It was a rare indulgence. But this journey held a significance that made it all worthwhile. She longed for comfort, a small reward after years of hard work, saving and ensuring her family had everything they could ever need. Now she allowed herself these little luxuries, and this was one of them. The waiting area buzzed with life as passengers trickled in, some whispering softly, others absorbed in their screens. She adjusted the strap of her purse on her shoulder, her gaze steady and hopeful. At the boarding gate, time seemed to stretch endlessly, each passing minute heavy with anticipation. Suddenly, the announcement resonated through the speakers, breaking the stillness. Passengers flying first class on Flight 382 to Atlanta may now begin boarding. With her heart racing, she clutched the handle of her suitcase tightly, stepping forward into the throng. A few other first-class passengers joined her. Businessmen clad in sleek suits, a young couple sharing hushed words, a woman hidden behind oversized sunglasses, absorbed in her phone. They all moved past her, their indifference wrapping around her like a cloak. But she felt a strange sense of peace. She approached the gate agent and handed over her ticket, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. As she scanned the surroundings, her gaze fell on the jet bridge, and with each step down the narrow passage, a wave of cool air greeted her from the plane's entrance. A flight attendant stood at the door, welcoming passengers with a smile that felt both warm and rehearsed. Lauren Mitchell, a seasoned flight attendant with nearly a decade of experience, exuded a sense of authority that suggested she was in command of the cabin. She nodded at the first few passengers, her expression a blend of friendliness and detachment. Eudora stepped inside, her heart racing as she made her way toward her seat in the first-class cabin. She gently set her purse on the seat, her movements deliberate as she placed her suitcase into the overhead compartment. The seat enveloped her, soft and wide, offering a comforting embrace. As she eased into it, a quiet sigh escaped her lips. The weight of the last few days had been overwhelming, but now at last she could let go and find solace. Reaching into her purse, she retrieved a cherished photo, a snapshot of her granddaughter Amara, a sweet memory of her as a little girl standing outside her childhood home. With tender care, she traced the edges of the photograph with her thumb, savoring the warmth of the moment, before tucking it away safely. Just as she settled in, a sharp A voice sliced through the tranquil hum of the cabin. "Excuse me, ma'am. I think you're in the wrong seat." Eudora looked up, her heart sinking as she saw Madison standing beside her, arms crossed and a slight frown etched on her face. The woman's uniform was impeccably crisp, Her hair pulled back into a neat bun, and her name tag sparkled under the overhead lights. Eudora reached for her ticket, her expression steady yet tinged with uncertainty. "I believe this is my seat," but Madison didn't even spare a glance at the ticket, shaking her head dismissively. "First class is reserved for paying passengers. Are you sure you didn't mean to sit in the main cabin?" In that fleeting moment, Eudora felt a flicker of disbelief, as if she had misheard. But then, she caught the way Madison's eyes roamed over her, the subtle pause in her stance, the weight of unspoken words in her tone. It was clear this was about more than just a ticket. It was deeper, more personal. Eudora straightened her back, her fingers gripping the small piece of paper tightly. "This is my assigned seat," she declared, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Madison let out a sigh, her impatience palpable, while a few nearby passengers turned their heads, some with curiosity, others feigning indifference. The woman leaned in closer, lowering her voice, yet the tension hung thick in the air. There was an undeniable authority in her tone, a sense of finality that made the air thick with tension. "Let's not make this difficult. I can help you find your real seat." A slow burn ignited in Eudora's chest, a mix of frustration and determination. She had been nothing but polite, adhering to every rule, and yet here she was, being asked to leave a place that was rightfully hers. She exhaled through her nose, trying to steady her voice, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. "I won't be moving. I have my ticket, and this is where I'm supposed to sit." Madison's expression hardened, surprise flickering in her eyes at the unexpected defiance. She straightened, adjusting her uniform with a hint of irritation. "I'll be right back," she said curtly before turning away. As she turned on her heel and walked toward the front of the plane, Eudora remained seated, her fingers gently resting on the armrest. Yet her mind was anything but tranquil. The whispers surrounding her faded into a hush, the atmosphere in the cabin transforming. She could sense it, the oppressive weight of every gaze, the unspoken judgment from the passengers, all waiting with bated breath to see what would unfold next. Though she had committed no wrongdoing, an unsettling premonition settled within her. She instinctively understood that this was far from over. Eudora sat rigidly, her back straight, hands folded neatly in her lap, as the air around her grew increasingly suffocating. The silence enveloped her, heavy and suffocating, as if an invisible weight pressed down upon her. She could sense the stares of the other passengers, some filled with a quiet curiosity, while others hastily averted their eyes, unwilling to engage. It was a familiar scene. People noticed, people understood, yet no one dared to speak up. With determination, Madison strode toward the front of the plane, her heels echoing sharply against the carpeted floor. She brushed past Ethan Carter, a younger crew member busy checking the galley supplies, his brow furrowing at her abrupt movement. "Everything okay?" Jonas inquired, concern lacing his voice. Adjusting his tie, Madison let out an exasperated huff. "There's a woman in first class who shouldn't be there. I told her to move, but she's refusing." Jonas glanced over Madison's shoulder, spotting Eudora sitting calmly in her seat. His brows furrowed slightly. "Did you check her ticket?" Madison rolled her eyes, frustration evident in her voice. "I don't need to check it. I know a mistake when I see one. She probably switched seats with someone, or maybe she actually belongs there." The voice that interrupted them was calm, yet authoritative. Captain James Holt had stepped out of the cockpit, his sharp blue eyes locking onto Madison with a quiet intensity. Under the weight of scrutiny, he stood as a seasoned pilot, a man whose years in the sky far outnumbered the lives of some of his crew. He had little patience for unnecessary drama during flights. Madison felt a rush of tension at his presence, but she quickly composed herself, adopting a professional demeanor. "Sir, I believe there's been an issue with seating. A woman in first class, Mrs. Hale." Captain Vaughn interrupted her, his voice steady. Madison blinked in surprise. "You know her." The captain nodded, his expression a mask of calm. "I've flown her before, more than once. She's a respected customer." Jonas let out a frustrated exhale through his nose. As he crossed his arms, it seemed to affirm that her ticket was indeed valid. Madison's fingers twitched with uncertainty. "I still need to confirm. I can't let passengers feel misplaced." Captain Vaughn's hardened demeanor made it clear that the only real mistake would be to make anyone feel unwelcome. For the first time, a wave of unease washed over Madison. She was accustomed to seizing control, to making swift decisions and moving forward. But now, under the intensity of the captain's gaze, she sensed something slipping away. Yet she mustered the strength to nod politely, signaling her understanding. "Sir, I'll take care of it without any more discussion." She turned and walked back toward first class, but this time her steps lacked the usual confidence. Eudora remained completely still when Madison returned, simply looking up, her gaze steady and expectant. Madison took a deep breath, her voice softer, yet still laced with a forced authority. "I'm going to need to see your boarding pass." Eudora didn't hesitate. She reached into her purse, pulled out the crisp ticket, and handed it over silently. Madison scanned the details, her throat tightening as she processed the information. She caught sight of seat 3A in first class, and a wave of regret washed over her, settling in her stomach like a heavy stone. Yet she masked her feelings with a tight smile as she handed the ticket back. "Thank you, just making sure everything is in order." Eudora accepted it, slipping it back into her purse, her gaze unwavering, her expression serene. But there was an undeniable spark in her eyes, a silent acknowledgement that pierced through Madison, revealing that she understood precisely what had transpired. Madison turned away, her heart racing, her cheeks aflame. But as she made her way back to the front of the plane, she remained blissfully unaware of the young woman across the aisle, Mia Alvarez, who had been capturing the entire exchange on her phone. Celeste was not one to remain silent in the face of injustice. Lowering her phone slightly, her heart raced with urgency. She had witnessed such moments before, those painful instances when someone was treated unfairly, dismissed, or questioned simply because they didn't conform to someone else's narrow view of belonging. But this time it was different. This time it was real and unfolding right before her eyes. Before her lay undeniable proof, and as she glanced at Eudora, who remained composed, Celeste sensed an unsettling familiarity in the way the older woman's hands rested on her lap. It was clear this wasn't Eudora's first encounter with such a situation. She bore the weight of experience without surprise. Celeste's gaze shifted to the front of the plane, where Madison had vanished, likely attempting to dismiss the turmoil. A surge of frustration coursed through her as she clenched her jaw, her fingers tightening around her phone. If the flight attendant believed she could treat someone with such disregard and simply move on, she was sorely mistaken. If nothing happened, she was wrong. Meanwhile, up front, Madison stepped into the galley, pressing a hand against her forehead. She hadn't anticipated being corrected, not by the captain, not by Jonas. It made her chest tighten with frustration. For years, she had dedicated herself to first class, managing high-profile passengers and ensuring everything was perfect. This was her domain, her authority, and yet in mere moments, that old woman had stripped away her confidence, leaving her feeling inadequate. She needed to reclaim her power. Straightening her uniform, she took a deep breath, stepped back out, her heart racing as she scanned the cabin. The other passengers had settled in, most retreating into their books or devices, lost in their own worlds. It was fine, she thought. This moment would fade into the background by the time the plane took off. But then, out of the corner of her eye, she noticed a flicker of movement. Celeste was tapping away on her phone screen. Madison's frown deepened as she stepped forward, her voice steady but laced with concern. "Excuse me, ma'am. What are you doing?" Celeste barely looked up, her focus still on the screen. "Just checking my messages." Madison narrowed her eyes, a sense of urgency rising within her. "I'd appreciate it if passengers didn't record crew members during flight preparations." Celeste met her gaze, a flicker of defiance in her eyes. Her gaze locked onto Madison, an unreadable expression etched on her face. "Oh, I thought airlines encourage passengers to document their experiences." Madison's stomach twisted in knots. There was a weight to Celeste's words, a deliberate edge that sent a shiver down her spine. Celeste leaned back in her seat, casually adjusting her phone, a smirk playing at the corners of her lips. "I guess it's only a problem when the experience doesn't look good, huh?" Madison clenched her jaw, trying to drown out the unease that threatened to consume her. Just focus on getting ready for takeoff, ma'am. She turned and walked away, desperately trying to shake off the discomfort that clung to her like a shadow. She stepped into the hall once more, her heart racing as she pulled out her phone to check the airline's customer feedback page. A lump formed in her throat as she saw a video, just a few seconds long, already uploaded. The title struck her like a bolt. Elderly woman harassed for sitting in first class. Flight attendant doubts her ticket. The view count was climbing rapidly, each number a reminder of the injustice. Madison's fingers tightened around her phone, her pulse quickening as she watched the numbers soar. Comments flooded in beneath the video, some questioning what had transpired, others outright condemning the way Eudora had been treated. "What's happening?" Jonas's voice pierced through her swirling thoughts. He had just finished checking on the last of the passengers and returned to the galley, his eyes catching the troubled expression on Madison's face. She quickly locked her screen, forcing a mask of neutrality over her emotions. "Nothing, just checking something," she replied. But Jonas raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. "You sure? You look like you just saw a ghost." Madison exhaled sharply, trying to shake off the weight of her worries. "It's fine. Let's just get this flight in the air." Yet deep down, she knew it wasn't fine at all. The unease lingered like a shadow over her heart. "Having spent enough time in this job, I've witnessed how quickly a negative passenger experience can spiral into chaos. The airline truly understands the weight of public perception, especially in the age of social media. If this video continued to circulate, it would no longer be just a private matter between her and the captain. The corporate office would inevitably step in. And right now, the last thing Madison could handle was drawing unwanted scrutiny from the higher-ups. Meanwhile, in first class, Celeste observed Madison slip away once more, before turning her phone screen towards Eudora. "Excuse me. Ma'am, I just wanted to check in. Are you okay?" Eudora's lips curled into a gentle smile, yet a flicker of something guarded lingered in her eyes. "Oh, I'm fine, sweetheart. Thank you for asking." Celeste hesitated, her heart heavy, before speaking again. "I saw what happened. It wasn't right." Eudora sighed, her fingers gliding over the fabric of her dress. "It never is, but people like me learn how to cope. We don't always get to fight back. Sometimes it's easier to let things go." Celeste's jaw tightened, frustration bubbling within her. "That's the problem, though. You shouldn't have to bear it alone. You shouldn't have to prove your worth." Eudora cast a knowing glance, one that carried the weight of countless battles fought in silence, of fleeting moments just like this one that had come and gone. "That's the way the world is, dear," she said softly. "But that doesn't mean people can't change." Celeste sank back into her seat, feeling the heaviness of Eudora's words. She admired the woman's unwavering patience, yet doubt crept in. Could she ever match that calm? As she refreshed her phone screen, her heart raced. The video had now been shared by an airline watchdog account, and in mere minutes, everything would shift irrevocably. Under Madison's control, her stomach twisted with anxiety as she tucked her phone back into her pocket. The view count was rising, but she had to concentrate. The plane hadn't even taken off yet, and she couldn't let the situation unravel any further. If she kept her head down, did her job, and pretended as if nothing had happened, perhaps, just perhaps, this would all blow over. She straightened her uniform and stepped back into the first-class cabin, resolute in her effort to maintain a facade of normalcy. Yet the moment she entered, she felt the palpable shift in energy, the heavy silence wrapping around her like a shroud. The stairs loomed ahead, and the way the passengers subtly shifted their bodies toward the aisle felt charged, as if they were bracing for an impending moment. It wasn't outright rebellion, but it stirred a sense of unease within her. Eudora remained still, her posture impeccably straight, her expression a mask of inscrutability. She wasn't sulking or causing a scene, yet her mere presence radiated a quiet strength that left Madison feeling unsettled. In stark contrast, Celeste was a whirlwind of energy. She locked eyes with Madison and offered a knowing glance, a silent promise that this wasn't the end. Madison chose to look away, ignoring the unspoken tension that hung in the air. She cleared her throat, her heart racing as she moved to check on another passenger. Just as she turned, A new voice broke through the air. "Excuse me, miss?" Madison paused, her breath hitching as she noticed an older man sitting a row ahead, leaning slightly into the aisle. Frederick Lane, a distinguished gentleman in his 60s, regarded her with mild curiosity. He exuded the essence of someone who had navigated the tumultuous waters of business, witnessing the ebb and flow of power more times than he could ever count. "Yes, sir," Madison replied, striving to keep her voice steady. Frederick gestured toward Eudora. Without turning to face her, I caught snippets of the earlier conversation, my heart racing with concern. Was there a problem with this lady's ticket? Madison felt a tension grip her spine. "No, sir. Everything has been sorted," she replied, her voice steady despite the unease. Frederick nodded slowly, his fingers drumming against the armrest, a sign of his impatience. "I see. It's just, I fly first class all the time, and I can't recall anyone else being questioned like that." A wave of heat washed over Madison's face, but she stood her ground. "Sir, we check tickets when necessary to ensure passenger comfort and security." Frederick raised an eyebrow, his tone icy, as if challenging her resolve. "I don't—" A wave of uncertainty washed over me as I pondered whether this was truly necessary. The air in the cabin felt thick, almost suffocating. Madison tightened her jaw, mustering another polite smile. "Sir, if you have any concerns about our policies, I encourage you to file a report with customer service." Frederick chuckled softly, shaking his head. "No need for that. It seems the internet is already on it." Madison's breath hitched for a fleeting moment, but she maintained her composure. "Please let me know if you need anything else, sir," she said, turning swiftly to retreat to the galley. She could hear the comments swirling around her, each one igniting a fire beneath her skin as she gripped the counter, struggling to breathe. The weight of it all felt suffocating, pressing down on her with an unbearable heaviness. The video, the whispers, haunted her thoughts. And the realization that the passengers were not simply forgetting this nightmare sent a chill through her. Then, her worst fear materialized. The in-flight phone rang. She stared at it, her stomach twisting into tight knots. No one ever called the crew before takeoff unless it was a matter of urgency. With trembling hands, she slowly picked it up. "This is Lauren Mitchell speaking." A deep voice on the other end sent a shiver down her spine. "This is Daniel Henshaw from Airline Corporate Relations. We need to discuss the incident on board." Madison swallowed hard, gripping the phone tightly. The voice on the other end was calm yet unyielding, a tone that left no space for excuses. "Miss Keene, we've received multiple reports about a situation involving a first-class passenger. Can you confirm what happened?" Robert Langley's voice resonated with authority, and Madison felt the heavy burden of scrutiny in every word. Her mind raced, torn between the urge to defend herself and the weight of the truth she had to confront. To minimize the situation, making it seem like just a small misunderstanding, but she was well aware of the video circulating online, and corporate had undoubtedly seen it too. She took a deep breath, striving to maintain her composure. There was a moment of silence before she spoke. "There was a brief issue with a seating confirmation, but it's been resolved." Another pause, and then the truth hit her hard. "That's not what we're seeing." Madison felt the heat flush her neck as she continued. "Sir, I was simply ensuring that all passengers were properly seated according to airline policy, and in doing so, you singled out an elderly black woman in front of the entire first class cabin." Her breath caught in her throat as he spoke, his words striking her with an unyielding clarity, devoid of any softness. It was more impactful than she had anticipated. M. Keene Daniel pressed on. "Do you grasp the gravity of this situation? This isn't merely about a single complaint. It's about the reputation of our airline at this very moment. A video is spreading online, racking up thousands of views. Passengers on this flight are fully aware of what transpired, and we already have an internal review team gathering reports from the captain and crew." Madison's fingers clenched tightly. As the words echoed in the air, it became painfully clear that this situation was not going to resolve itself. "Sir, I was only doing my job," I pleaded, desperation creeping into my voice. But that only seemed to deepen the chasm between us. "That's exactly the problem," he replied, his words striking me like a harsh blow. If this is how you believe your job should be done, then we have a serious issue. My heart sank as he continued. Effective immediately, you are to be relieved of duty for the remainder of this flight. The weight of his decision crashed down on me, and I felt my stomach drop. You will remain on board as a passenger, but you are no longer authorized to act in any capacity as a crew member. The finality of his words left me reeling. Another attendant would take over my responsibilities, and when the flight lands, I would have to report to management for further action. She felt lightheaded. This was worse than she had ever imagined. Sir, please, this is not up for discussion. His voice was final. Captain Vall has already been notified. You will comply. The call ended with a sharp click. Madison stood frozen, the phone still pressed to her ear, even though the line had gone dead. This couldn't be happening. She had dedicated years to this airline, building her reputation, and now because of one passenger, one fleeting moment, she was being stripped of her authority. In front of a whole cabin filled with people, she turned her head slowly, her gaze locking onto Jonas, who was watching her from across the galley. His expression was a mask, unreadable and cold, devoid of any sympathy. He had heard every word she hadn't even had the chance to speak. Just then, the intercom crackled to life, the captain's voice echoing through the cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Vall. We will be departing shortly. Flight attendants, please secure the cabin for takeoff. Jonas stepped forward, his voice steady yet commanding. I'll take over from here, Madison. You should find yourself a seat. Her throat constricted painfully as Jonas spoke, and in that moment, everything changed. Lauren Mitchell felt the weight of defeat crash down upon her. She stood frozen, gripping the edge of the galley counter, the harsh reality of her loss settling in like a heavy fog. The airline had stripped her of her authority mid-flight, leaving her exposed and humiliated before her own crew. Now she was forced to sit among the very passengers who had just witnessed her downfall. Jonas's gaze pierced through her, urging her to comply. I suggest you take your seat before the captain asks why you're still standing. She longed to argue to defend her honor, but the words caught in her throat. She tried to convince herself that everything was being exaggerated, yet the gravity of the situation anchored her in place. She realized she was no longer in control, no longer the one who dictated the terms. Without uttering another word, she turned and made her way stiffly toward the first-class cabin. As she stepped into the aisle, an overwhelming sense of scrutiny enveloped her. The whispers of the crowd were absent, but the silence roared in her ears. It was a profound shift in power, one she had dedicated her entire career to avoiding. With her gaze fixed ahead, she hurried on, her heart racing. Her breath came in shallow gasps, but as she walked past Eudora, the older woman looked up and caught her gaze. There was no hint of smugness, no gloating, no satisfaction, just a quiet, watchful presence. Madison clenched her jaw and continued on, her heart racing with the weight of Celeste's stare, Frederick's judgment, and the eyes of the passengers who had witnessed the entire scene unfold. She found an empty seat near the front of the economy section, slid into it, and gazed out the window, feeling the gravity of the moment for the first time since donning her uniform all those years ago. She felt so insignificant. Meanwhile, in first class, Jonas approached Eudora's seat, his demeanor steady and composed. Mrs. Hale, I want to sincerely apologize for what occurred earlier. It was completely unacceptable. Eudora offered a faint smile, her eyes reflecting a lifetime of wisdom. That's very kind of you, young man, but I've been on this earth long enough to understand that words are easy. Actions are what truly matter. Jonas nodded, fully grasping the depth of her words. I can assure you, what happened will not be overlooked. Celeste, still clutching her phone, glanced between them before finally breaking the silence. It already isn't. Jonas turned slightly, catching a glimpse of her screen. The video had skyrocketed in views with thousands of comments, retweets, and news outlets already picking up the story. Celeste smirked. Seems like the world is watching. Eudora simply exhaled, glancing toward the front of the plane where Madison sat stiffly in her seat. The flight had barely begun, but for Madison Keene, the turbulence had already started. The quiet hum of the engines filled the cabin as the plane began taxiing down the runway, but inside there was a palpable tension. A different kind of tension enveloped her, one that had nothing to do with the turbulence outside. The instant Madison sank into her economy seat, she felt an oppressive weight settle on her chest. This was never meant to be her reality. She had always been the one in charge, the one who commanded respect, the authority figure everyone looked up to. But now she was just another face in the crowd, another passenger lost in the sea of anonymity. She could still sense the stares, the hushed whispers among first-class passengers, and the furtive glances from the economy section as people discreetly checked their phones. The video was spreading, and with it, her world was unraveling. She found herself at the heart of it all, her arms wrapped around herself as if to shield her from the storm brewing within. Her gaze was locked on the seat back in front of her, a desperate hope flickering in her mind that if she could just endure this flight, perhaps, just perhaps, there might be a way to mend the pieces before it shattered her career beyond repair. Yet deep down, an unsettling truth gnawed at her. She knew the damage was already done. Meanwhile, back in first class, Celeste refreshed her feed, a bittersweet chuckle escaping her lips as she saw the video had gone viral, spreading like wildfire across multiple social media platforms, with some airline watchdog accounts already taking notice. Tagging the company's official page, she demanded a response, turning her phone slightly toward Eudora. "You're famous, Miss Hale," Eudora chuckled softly, shaking her head. "Fame isn't what I was looking for. I just wanted to sit in the seat I paid for." Celeste nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. "Well, the internet has other plans. People are angry, and the airline will have to respond soon." Just as she finished speaking, Jonas approached again, kneeling slightly to meet Eudora's gaze. He kept his voice low, but there was a hint of something darker in his tone. "Mrs. Hale, I wanted to see if there's anything we can do to make this flight more comfortable for you. A meal preference, a drink, anything at all." Eudora studied him for a moment before smiling. "I appreciate it, young man, but I don't need special treatment. I just wanted to be treated like everyone else." Jonas nodded slowly, the weight of her words settling heavily in his chest. He had witnessed unfair situations unfold before. Passengers ignored, assumptions made, but rarely had he seen the tables turn so swiftly. Before he could respond, a familiar voice interrupted the moment, crackled through the overhead speaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Vaughn speaking. We've now reached our cruising altitude of 35,000 feet, and we anticipate a smooth flight today with minimal turbulence. In the meantime, please sit back, relax, and enjoy your journey." Jonas let out a sigh, acutely aware that his responsibilities were far from over. He offered Eudora a courteous nod before making his way back to the galley. As he walked away, Celeste couldn't help but smirk. "I bet Madison isn't relaxing right now." Eudora's lips curled into a slight smile. "I expect she's learning something, though." Economy. Madison stared blankly ahead, her hands gripping the seatbelt strap tightly. The first few minutes had been challenging, but now she felt utterly vulnerable. The uniform that once symbolized her authority now felt like a heavy burden, suffocating her spirit. Suddenly, a voice broke through her thoughts, startling her. "Excuse me, miss." She turned sharply to see a man seated beside her, a father with his young daughter nestled against his arm. He looked hesitant, almost apologetic, but his words pierced her heart more than he realized. "Aren't you supposed to be working up front?" A fresh wave of embarrassment crashed over her, and she struggled to maintain a tight smile, shaking her head. "I was reassigned." The man offered an awkward nod, feeling the palpable tension, and swiftly redirected his attention to his daughter. Madison let out a slow breath, her grip on her seat tightening. She knew this was going to be the longest flight of her life. Meanwhile, in the airline's corporate office, Robert Langley sat at his desk, poring over the mounting reports. He had already watched the video twice, and with each viewing, his expression grew darker. He turned to the assistant mentioned that the PR team is currently drafting a response. She nodded, acknowledging their efforts, but there was a heaviness in her voice as she continued. "Honestly, sir, this has escalated beyond just an online issue. We're receiving calls from customers, and some are even threatening to boycott us." She paused, her expression turning serious as she added, "We just received a direct complaint from a VIP member, the one involved in the incident." Daniel's jaw tightened at the mention. "You mean Mrs. Hale?" he asked, his concern palpable. She nodded, her demeanor calm yet troubled. She didn't make a scene. She simply sought clarification on why she was singled out. But given her loyalty to the airline, this is particularly concerning. Daniel rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of the situation. This is dire. He clutched his phone, desperately scrolling through the internal contacts until he finally found the name he needed. Michael Vaughn, Senior Vice President of Flight Operations. With a deep breath, he pressed the call button, knowing that this was no longer just Madison's issue. It was about to escalate to the highest levels. Madison shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her breath coming in uneven gasps as the weight of her predicament sank in. The uniform she had worn with such pride for nearly a decade now felt like an unbearable burden. The whispers around her echoed in her mind, amplifying her anxiety. The fleeting glances from passengers, those moments when they thought she was oblivious, pierced her heart. She was unaccustomed to this sensation of being scrutinized, judged. Always before, she had held the power, the authority, the one whose voice commanded attention. Now she felt like just another face in the crowd, and it filled her with a deep-seated resentment. She wrapped her arms around herself, gripping tightly, her gaze fixed on the front of the plane. Jonas had seamlessly stepped into her role, moving gracefully through first class, checking on passengers with an ease that made her insides twist. It hurt. She had been the one in charge, the one who orchestrated everything here, who had meticulously ensured that every detail was perfect. But now, without a moment's thought or a hint of resistance, someone else had taken her place, making her feel as though she had never mattered at all. She turned away, exhaling sharply, desperate to simply survive this flight. She clung to the hope that she could find a way to mend things, to clarify the situation once they landed. Perhaps it wasn't too late to save her career. But then, her phone vibrated in her pocket, and with a sinking feeling in her stomach, she hesitantly pulled it out. Her heart raced as she saw the notification at the top of the screen. Breaking news. Airline faces a wave of outrage surged after a passenger was unjustly removed from first class, sparking allegations of discrimination. Her breath caught in her throat as she tapped on the article, her eyes racing through the words. A video making the rounds on social media captures a flight attendant confronting an elderly black woman about her rightful seat in first class, despite her having a valid ticket. The flight attendant has since been taken off duty mid-flight, and reports indicate that airline executives are now stepping in. Customers are already demanding a thorough investigation, and the comments flooding in beneath the article stirred a deep sense of unease within her. Her throat tightened as a wave of frustration washed over her. This is precisely why accountability in air travel is so crucial. This woman has likely flown more times than that flight attendant has even been on the job, and it's infuriating. The fact that they pulled the flight attendant from duty mid-flight speaks volumes. They know she was in the wrong. Madison gripped her phone tightly, a bitter taste rising in her throat. It wasn't just a feeling of anger. It was an explosion of emotions. As she scrolled further, she saw the airline's official account already inundated with thousands of mentions from furious customers, and her stomach churned. A statement had been released, and as she read the words, each one felt like a tightening noose around her throat. "We take all customer concerns seriously. The incident involving a first-class passenger on Flight 382 is under immediate review. The crew member in question has been placed on leave pending further investigation. Our airline remains committed to ensuring all passengers are treated with dignity and respect." Her heart raced at the phrase "placed on leave." It meant they weren't merely planning to talk to her. It felt far more serious than that. As they landed, a chilling realization washed over her. They were already plotting her removal. She glanced around, an overwhelming sense of dread enveloping her, as if the very walls of the plane were closing in. She had witnessed colleagues being dismissed before, sometimes for the tiniest of errors, other times for situations beyond their control. But this felt different. This time there was undeniable video evidence. Once the public got wind of it, the airline would not hesitate to sever ties to shield its reputation. Her heart raced, pounding in her ears, as panic surged, clawing its way up her throat. She turned her She turned off her phone, shoving it deep into her pocket as if that simple act could erase everything that had just happened. But deep down, she knew it wouldn't. Meanwhile, back in first class, Eudora sat in silence, her hands resting on her lap. The plane felt serene now, yet an undeniable tension hung in the air. She could sense it, the way some passengers avoided her gaze, while others offered her quiet nods of recognition. Confusion washed over her. She had spent a lifetime navigating moments like this, some subtle, others glaringly obvious, all of them weighing heavily on her heart. Exhausting in their own way, but never had one unfolded so openly, nor had the repercussions hit so swiftly. Celeste, sitting across from her, tapped on her phone before looking up, a glint of mischief in her eyes. Looks like corporate finally responded. Eudora raised an eyebrow, her heart racing. What did they say? Celeste smirked, a hint of satisfaction in her voice. They're investigating, which basically means they're already preparing to fire her. Eudora inhaled slowly, a wave of dread washing over her. I don't want anyone to lose their job over this. Celeste scoffed, her tone sharp. Miss Hale was ready to throw you off this plane like you were nothing. Slipping in here without a ticket, she didn't even take the time to check things thoroughly before making such a big decision. Why should she be allowed to keep her job? Eudora tilted her head slightly, her expression thoughtful, because people only transform when they are given the opportunity. Celeste hesitated, her heart heavy with doubt. And what if she doesn't change? Eudora responded with a knowing smile. Then she won't be boarding another plane, will she? Celeste sighed, leaning back, feeling the weight of the moment. You're far too patient, Miss Hale. Eudora chuckled softly, her voice warm. It's not patience, dear. It's simply understanding that the world has its own way of sorting things out. She looked on, her gaze steady, toward the front of the plane where Madison sat frozen, her hands tightly gripping her lap. She could sense the turmoil within the woman, undoubtedly grappling with her choices, perhaps even haunted by the fear of losing her career. But what was regret if it didn't spark transformation? As the plane soared through the sky, the world beneath them was already in flux, and soon Lauren Mitchell would face a pivotal choice about her own path. The low hum of the engines resonated through the cabin, yet for Madison it was as if the sound had vanished, overshadowed by the heavy ache in her chest. It felt as if an unseen force was squeezing her throat, making it hard to breathe. She shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her hands balled into tight fists in her lap. No matter how desperately she tried to find her balance, the harsh truth loomed over her. Her career, everything she had poured her heart and soul into, was teetering on the edge. With a furtive glance toward first class, she noticed the curtain had been drawn, sealing her off from the realm she once commanded, from the passengers who had relied on her just an hour ago. Now she found herself lost among those very individuals she had always overlooked. Mere whispers in the bustling crowd. The travelers who drifted by her as she boarded, the ones she seldom acknowledged unless they required assistance, and now she found herself among them. Her heart raced at the familiar sound of a flight attendant nearing, her body tensed, bracing for Jonas to reappear and deepen her embarrassment. But instead, it was Sarah Ellis, a warm presence, another attendant who had been diligently working in economy. Sarah Ellis had always been kind, her voice gentle and her demeanor efficient. Yet as she paused beside her, a wave of vulnerability washed over. Madison sat there, her expression a complex puzzle that no one could decipher. Would you like something to drink? She asked, her voice steady yet gentle. Madison blinked, caught off guard by the unexpected offer. She hesitated, her throat parched. Water, please. Sarah Ellis nodded slightly, handing her a plastic cup, then paused for a moment, sensing the weight of the day. Madison nearly scoffed at the understatement, but swallowed her frustration. She didn't want pity. She didn't want kindness. What she craved was a solution, a way to mend everything before it slipped through her fingers. Something like that, she muttered, taking the cup and gripping it tightly, as if it could anchor her in the storm of her thoughts. Too tightly, Sarah Ellis tilted her head slightly, as if caught in a moment of contemplation. Finally, she spoke, her voice laced with concern. People are talking about it, you know. Madison felt a knot twist in her stomach. Sarah Ellis gestured toward a few passengers, casually scrolling through their phones, their eyes flickering with recognition. Some of them already know your name. You might want to brace yourself when we land. Madison's throat constricted painfully. Sarah Ellis studied her for a heartbeat longer before stepping back, her expression softening. If you need anything, just let me know. And just like that, she was gone. Madison found herself staring at the untouched water in her hands, the weight of preparation settling heavily on her, herself for what she already sensed was on the horizon. The moment they touched down, she braced for the inevitable confrontation at the gate, where management, perhaps even security, would be waiting. She envisioned being ushered into an office, the air thick with tension, as she was compelled to defend her actions. The uncomfortable meeting loomed ahead, a trial where she would struggle to explain why she had dared to question Eudora's seat without the necessary verification. And deep down, she knew the outcome. They would let her go. It felt crushing, knowing that nearly a decade of dedication to the airline would mean nothing, that her unwavering adherence to policies throughout her career would be overlooked, and that her commitment would fade into insignificance. The strictness towards first-class passengers felt utterly irrelevant now, as the world had witnessed her actions, and the airline would undoubtedly prioritize their reputation over her defense. She let out a sharp breath, finally taking a small sip of water, but it did nothing to ease the fiery ache in her throat. Meanwhile, in first class, Celeste was glued to her phone, watching the comments pour in on the airline's page. A smirk crept across her face as she turned to Eudora. "Looks like you're a trending topic, Miss Hale." Eudora sighed, feeling the weight of it all. "Is that really meant to comfort me?" Celeste smiled. "Perhaps not, but it shows that people are noticing." Eudora clasped her hands in her lap, observing Jonas navigate the cabin, managing service as if nothing had transpired. That's the reality of moments like this. People move on swiftly, the world continues to turn, the airline will release a statement, and soon the news cycle will focus on something entirely different. But for Lauren Mitchell, this would be a burden she would carry forever. Celeste began scrolling through the comments, her eyes darting over the posts, calling for the airline to take decisive action against Madison, urging for a transformation in employee training. Then she hesitated, her curiosity piqued. Eudora glanced at her, sensing the shift. Celeste adjusted her phone, revealing a new post that sent a chill down her spine. It seemed the airline wasn't merely placing Madison on leave. They were already investigating her flight records to uncover any past incidents. Eudora's brows furrowed in concern. "So they're really digging deeper?" Celeste nodded, a heavy weight in her heart. "It appears so. If this isn't the first time she's behaved this way, her career could be over." Eudora exhaled slowly, a whirlwind of emotions swirling within her. She found herself grappling with uncertainty, while Les seemed to move forward without hesitation. Karma was swift today, and in the midst of it all, Madison's phone vibrated once more. She hesitated, her heart racing before pulling it out. Another notification, but this time it wasn't just another social media update. It was from her personal email. Her breath caught in her throat as she read the subject line. "Notification of formal review. Immediate response required." A wave of dread washed over her as she opened it, her stomach churning with anxiety as she read the words that would irrevocably alter her path. "M. Keene, this email serves as an official notification that you are now under formal review by the airline's compliance board. Effective immediately, you are suspended from all flight duties pending further investigation. A meeting has been scheduled upon landing to discuss next steps. You are required to report to management upon arrival at the gate. Failure to comply may result in termination." Her hands trembled slightly as she read the words again. Suspended. This wasn't just a removal from this flight. It felt like an official expulsion. Her chest tightened as the weight of the situation sank in, realizing just how rapidly everything had spiraled out of control. This morning she felt utterly shattered. Once a senior flight attendant, she had glided through her routine with grace, but now she was helplessly witnessing her entire career slip away. She switched off her phone, and let her head fall back against the seat, staring blankly at the ceiling for the first time since the flight began. A feeling she was unaccustomed to washed over her. Powerlessness. Madison's breath became shallow as the weight of the email enveloped her, like a suffocating blanket, the words reverberating in her mind, drowning out even the relentless hum of the engines. Louder than the whispers of passengers lost in their screens, louder than the chaotic storm of thoughts swirling in her mind that she couldn't tame. This wasn't the way it was meant to unfold. Nearly a decade dedicated to this airline, she had been firm, yes, but always adhered to the rules. First-class seats were a privilege, reserved for those who could afford them, for those who fit in. Was it truly so wrong to have raised a question? Yet no matter how hard she tried to rationalize it, the truth lingered painfully. She had never questioned anyone else, not even once. She glanced at Eudora's ticket before jumping to the conclusion that she was in the wrong seat. In that moment, she had humiliated a woman in front of everyone, raising her voice without extending the basic courtesy she would have shown to any other first-class passenger. Now she was facing the consequences of her actions. A lump formed in her throat as she clutched the armrest, feeling the plane tremble slightly from the turbulence. Normally, she would have been the one to comfort passengers, ensuring they felt safe and secure. But now she was just another traveler, anxiously gripping her seat and waiting for the landing. Meanwhile, in first class, Eudora savored the tea Jonas had brought her, her movements slow and deliberate. She was not one to revel in the misfortunes of others. Gloating was beneath her. Yet she firmly believed in the weight of consequences. "Miss Hale, you might want to check this," Celeste whispered, turning her phone toward her. Eudora adjusted her glasses, her heart racing as she read the screen. The airline had just released another statement, this one carrying a gravity that sent a chill down her spine. "We are conducting an internal review to ensure every passenger deserves to be treated with fairness, and effective immediately, the flight attendant involved in the incident has been placed on indefinite suspension while an investigation takes place." Celeste smirked. "Indefinite suspension? That's just corporate speak for waiting until everyone forgets so they can quietly let her go." Eudora let out a soft sigh, feeling the weight of the situation. "I never wanted to cost someone their job." Celeste scoffed. "Miss Hale, you didn't cost her anything." She did this to herself. Eudora remained silent, but deep down she couldn't shake the feeling that Celeste was right. Jonas walked up. Just then, as he adjusted his tie before speaking to her, he said, "I just received word from the captain. When we land, airline security will be waiting for us at the gate." Eudora's expression darkened slightly. "For what purpose?" Jonas hesitated, casting a glance toward Madison, who was seated nearby. "They'll be escorting Miss Keene to the corporate offices for a formal hearing." Celeste leaned back, raising an eyebrow. "So they're not wasting any time?" Jonas shook his head, his voice heavy with concern. "Not when it's already in the public eye." Eudora pursed her lips, shifting uncomfortably in her seat. This situation had spiraled beyond their control. It was so much more than she had ever anticipated. She never wanted this to turn into a spectacle, yet that was precisely what it had become. Back in the economy section, Madison felt her stomach twist in knots as she spotted Jonas deep in conversation with Eudora. She understood all too well what they were discussing. She wasn't naive. Her career was slipping further away with each agonizing minute. Just when she thought things couldn't possibly get worse, another notification flashed on her phone. A missed call from the airline's HR department. Madison's breath caught in her throat. They weren't even waiting for her to land. She stared, frozen in disbelief. She stood there, phone in hand, heart racing as she hesitated before finally pressing play on the voicemail. "Miss King, this is Diane Foster from Human Resources. We need to speak with you immediately upon landing. Please check in with your supervisor at the gate. We are also notifying your union representative regarding your suspension." A chill swept through her entire being. This was far more than a mere reprimand, far more than an investigation. This was the looming shadow of termination. She glanced around, desperately trying to steady her breath, acutely aware of the passengers still watching her, their eyes heavy with unspoken judgment. The weight of judgment hung thick in the air as she turned her head, locking eyes with Walter Brooks, the older gentleman who had earlier called her out. To her astonishment, he wore a smug expression, shaking his head as if to convey, "You brought this upon yourself." Madison turned away, pressing her fingers against her forehead. For the first time since stepping onto this plane, she was engulfed by a new sensation: fear. Meanwhile, the plane began its descent, and Eudora fastened her seatbelt as the captain's voice resonated over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning. As we make our final approach, please make sure your seatbelts are fastened and your tray tables are secured. We'll be landing shortly." Celeste stretched her arms slightly, her eyes glancing toward Eudora. "Are you ready for the circus waiting at the gate?" Eudora let out a heavy sigh. "I didn't ask for a circus." Celeste smirked. "Well, you got one anyway." Eudora turned her gaze out the window, watching as the city below came into view. She had spent her entire life moving with grace, handling everything quietly, never making a fuss. But today, the world had thrust her into the spotlight, and it was all for Lauren Mitchell. The long fall from power was nearing its end, and the plane glided down with an unsettling grace. Yet within the cabin, a heavy tension hung in the air, palpable and suffocating. The usual thrill of landing was replaced by a profound silence, a shared awareness that something significant was on the verge of happening. As the wheels prepared to meet the ground, Economy Madison gripped the armrest tightly, her fingers pressing into the fabric, fighting against the knot in her throat. The notification from Human Resources loomed over her like a dark cloud, heavy with implications. Like a relentless clock ticking down to an unavoidable fate, the airline had already made its choice. She was no longer seen as an employee in waiting. She had become a liability they were determined to cast aside. Her heart raced with dread as she imagined what awaited her at the gate. Would they drag her into an office, forcing her to sign papers? Would they seek to humiliate her further, parading her through the airport with security looming beside her? The mere thought sent a fresh wave of nausea crashing over her. She had poured her heart and soul into her work for far too long to be dismissed in such a cruel manner. With a fierce determination, she gritted her teeth, desperately trying to summon the strength to find a way to battle this, to persuade them that this situation didn't warrant her dismissal. She had always leaned on rules, policies, and the power her position afforded her, but now those anchors had been torn away, leaving her feeling like just another employee under scrutiny, easily cast aside. Meanwhile, in first class, Eudora adjusted her seatbelt, her fingers gently caressing the gold wedding band she still wore after all these years. She had remained silent for most of the flight, allowing events to unfold as they would. They had to do it, but deep down, uncertainty gnawed at her heart about what was on the horizon. She never craved a spectacle, nor did she seek revenge. Yet the sting of humiliation in front of strangers felt unbearable, as if she were merely a problem to be erased. A soft sigh escaped her lips as she glanced at Celeste, who remained absorbed in her phone. "Well," Celeste said, tilting the screen toward her, "I hope you're ready to be on the news tonight." Eudora's brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean?" Celeste smirked. "Someone at the airport already leaked it." "The corporate meeting is causing quite a stir. Journalists are poised at the terminal, waiting." Eudora let out a deep breath, shaking her head in disbelief. This situation is spiraling beyond control. "No," Celeste interjected, crossing her legs with a sense of urgency. "This is the consequence of a world where acceptance has become a rarity." Jonas, who had been lingering near the galley, cleared his throat as he stepped closer to them. "Miss Hale, I just wanted to express my gratitude for your patience throughout this ordeal. I know it hasn't been easy." Eudora offered a gentle smile, warmth in her eyes. "I truly appreciate that, young man." Jonas hesitated, gathering his thoughts before continuing. I also wanted to share that Captain Vaugh was deeply troubled by the incident. He plans to file his own report once we land." Eudora raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Is that so?" Jonas nodded, his expression serious. "The captain has no patience for crew members who mistreat passengers. He confided in me that this kind of situation tarnishes the airline's reputation, not just because of the event itself, but because it could have been avoided." Celeste chuckled, sensing the underlying tension. Translation: Madison just made his job harder, and now he's ensuring she faces the consequences. Jonas sighed, a hint of frustration in his voice. Something like that. Eudora simply listened, absorbing the weight of the moment. She nodded, a quiet strength radiating from her. Never one to demand consequences, she held a deep belief in accountability, and for the first time, it felt like justice was unfolding before her eyes. The intercom crackled to life, Captain V's voice echoing through the cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, we have now arrived at our destination. Please remain seated until we reach the gate and the seatbelt sign is turned off. On behalf of the crew, thank you for flying with us today. As the plane taxied toward the terminal, an overwhelming sense of anticipation washed over Madison, leaving her breathless. She could see it now, just beyond the tiny window. The bright flashing lights of airport security illuminated the area near the jet bridge, where a crowd gathered just beyond the glass walls. Cameras were raised, and reporters whispered anxiously into their microphones. She stood on the brink of a public relations nightmare, her throat tightening with apprehension. Passengers in first class exchanged uneasy glances, some instinctively straightening up, as if bracing for the unexpected. Celeste gently nudged Eudora, both of them poised to disembark from the plane. Eudora sighed, her voice barely above a whisper. I just want to step off as a person, not a legend. Celeste beamed, realizing it was far too late for that. The seatbelt sign chimed off, and in an instant, everything shifted. Madison remained still, her heart racing as Jonas's voice echoed through the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our destination. We kindly ask that all passengers deplane in an orderly fashion. First-class passengers may disembark first. The first-class cabin stirred, not in haste, but with a sense of purpose. Eudora stood with elegance, lifting her purse onto her shoulder. Jonas offered to help her with her carry-on, but she gently declined, her warm smile radiating kindness. She didn't need anyone to guide her. She had navigated through life on her own 2 feet, and today would be no exception. As she made her way toward the aisle, something unexpected unfolded. Walter Brooks, the businessman who had previously challenged Madison, turned to her and offered a small nod of respect. The woman in sunglasses, who had remained silent until now, leaned in and whispered, I'm sorry you had to endure that. The passengers who had sat quietly throughout the flight now regarded her with newfound acknowledgement, as if they were finally awakening to her strength. Witnessed something they could never forget. Eudora, with a heart full of understanding, didn't blame them. She recognized that true change often begins with a single voice daring to speak out. With a soft nod, she acknowledged them before making her way to the front of the plane. As she stepped through the doorway, the intense heat of flashing lights and cameras greeted her just beyond the gate. In that instant, she transformed from a mere passenger into a symbol of hope. Behind her, Madison sat paralyzed in her seat, her hands tightly clutching the armrest, unable to look away as she watched Eudora fade into the world beyond the jet. Bridge she longed to flee, to vanish into thin air, yet there was no way out of this reality. The world was poised for her arrival, and this time, she was not the one in control. She was being called forth. Madison's breath hitched as she observed the passengers disembark, each one passing her by without a single glance, without a moment's consideration. She felt like a ghost in their midst, no longer part of their vibrant lives. Her hands quivered as they clutched the seat in front of her, a desperate anchor in a storm of uncertainty. She was far from ready to confront what lay beyond the plane door, fully aware that the instant she stepped into the terminal, her life would change forever. Life as she understood it was slipping away. The curtain that divided first class from economy had been left ajar, and there he was, Jonas, standing by the exit, ensuring that passengers were disembarking without a hitch. He didn't glance her way, didn't acknowledge her presence, but deep down she felt he knew she was still there. The aisle was clearing rapidly, and soon she would have no choice but to rise. She turned her phone over in her hands, torn between the urge to check it again and the hope that maybe, just maybe, corporate had sent another email, a lifeline that could somehow mend what was broken. She had sensed the storm brewing long before it reached its peak, yet deep within her heart, she understood that there was no remedy for this situation. For years, she had meticulously crafted her environment, dictating the flow of life around her, making swift judgments, and enforcing her own set of rules. But now, for the very first time, She found herself vulnerable, at the mercy of someone else's choices, and the fear gripped her tightly. A voice shattered her reverie. "Miss Keene!" She flinched, her gaze lifting to meet Jonas, who stood a few feet away, arms crossed, his expression a mask of uncertainty. "You need to—" He paused and she hesitated, her heart racing. "Are they waiting for me?" Her voice came out softer than she intended, barely a whisper. It was more than she ever wanted it to be. Jonas didn't hold back. He spoke the truth. Her stomach twisted in knots as she clutched the armrest, feeling paralyzed. Jonas took a deep breath and stepped closer. "Look, I can't predict what's going to happen when you step out of this plane, but I do know that staying here, feeling sorry for yourself, is only making it worse." Madison's head shot up, her eyes blazing. "I am a victim. This is all happening too fast. One mistake shouldn't cost me my career." Jonas held her gaze for a long moment, then let out a heavy sigh, a humorless chuckle escaping his lips as he absorbed her pain. "Madison, this wasn't just a simple mistake with a ticket or a forgotten drink. You shattered a passenger's dignity for no reason at all. You jumped to conclusions and stubbornly held on to them, even when she presented you with undeniable proof." Madison clenched her jaw, feeling the weight of his words. "I never intended for it to escalate like this, but here we are." Jonas's voice was unwavering, "And now you must face the fallout." She despised how easily he simplified the situation, as if it were merely black and white. But deep down she knew the truth. The world had turned against her in just a few short hours. She inhaled sharply, steeling herself to rise above it all. Her legs trembled with uncertainty as she reached for her bag, and Jonas stepped aside, granting her the space she desperately needed to move toward the exit. With each step closer to the front, a wave of suffocation washed over her. She could hear the voices beyond the door in the terminal, the distant clicking of cameras echoing in her mind. She paused at the threshold, calling out to Jonas, who looked at her with a patience that felt heavy. Her throat was parched, and she grappled with the words that danced on the tip of her tongue. An excuse, an explanation, or perhaps just a fleeting wish to erase it all. But in that moment, silence enveloped them, and there was nothing left to say. Jonas held her gaze, a connection that felt both fragile and profound. In that fleeting moment, she whispered a heartfelt good luck, and with that, Lauren Mitchell took her first step off the plane. She barely had time to acclimate to the blinding brightness of the terminal before she was engulfed by a whirlwind of flashing lights, hushed murmurs, and the heavy gaze of countless eyes fixated on her. A throng of reporters gathered near the gate, microphones poised, some already relaying the unfolding drama to their cameras for the evening news. Airport security loomed nearby, clearly prepared to guide her away the instant she emerged into this chaotic scene. Just a few feet away, surrounded by a throng of curious passengers and journalists, stood Eudora. Madison's breath caught in her throat. Eudora wasn't engaging with anyone. She was untouched by the chaos swirling around her. She stood tall, her face a picture of calm, and then she turned, locking eyes with Madison. In that moment, Madison felt utterly paralyzed. She had braced herself for anger, perhaps satisfaction, or even a hint of amusement. But Eudora's expression was a complete enigma. For the very first time, Madison found herself at a loss, unsure of what would happen next, because for the first time in her life, she was not in control. The terminal felt like a tempest of blinding lights, hushed whispers, and the soft hum of phones recording every fleeting moment surrounded Madison. Her heart raced as the gravity of the situation bore down on her, a weight far heavier than the suffocating confines of the plane. She sensed the cameras trained on her, the reporters inching closer, their anticipation palpable, waiting for her to respond. The urge to retreat, to step back onto the plane and vanish before the questions began, surged within her, but there was no way out now. Airport security moved in first. Uniformed officers moved closer, one gesturing toward her bag while the other nodded toward the private corridor that led away from the bustling terminal. "Miss Keene, we need you to come with us." Her mouth went dry, but she managed a stiff nod. She wasn't under arrest. She understood that much. Yet being escorted like this, in front of cameras and passengers who had once looked up to her as an authority figure, felt like a crushing humiliation she had never known before. Then Eudora stepped forward, and Madison's breath caught as their eyes locked once more. There was no anger in Eudora's gaze, expression, no satisfaction, just quiet observation, the kind that made Madison feel even smaller than she already did. For a fleeting moment, Madison was overwhelmed by the desperate urge to speak up, to defend herself, to explain, to plead for some semblance of understanding. But what could she possibly say? That it was merely a mistake? That she never intended for things to spiral so far out of control? That deep down, she wasn't a bad person? Yet none of those words could erase the reality of what had transpired. None of it could change the painful truth that she had humiliated Eudora, dismissed her, treated her as if she didn't belong. And none of it would ever be enough to mend the hurt she had caused. Alter the reality that the world had already deemed her guilty. The cameras pivoted, now framing both women together, two souls at starkly different points in the same narrative. Celeste, lingering just behind Eudora, whispered softly, "Well, this is poetic." Madison swallowed hard, summoning the strength to move as security ushered her toward the corridor. She fixed her eyes ahead, shutting out the cacophony of voices, the relentless clicks of cameras, and the heavy, unspoken judgment emanating from the onlookers who had just witnessed her tragic fall. Just as she was about to vanish from sight, Eudora's voice was calm, devoid of anger, yet unwavering. M. Keen Madison halted in her tracks, her grip on the strap of her bag tightening instinctively. She turned slowly, locking eyes with the woman she had desperately tried to cast away from that plane. For a fleeting moment, silence enveloped them. Then Eudora spoke again, her words simple yet profound. "I hope you learn from this." There was no malice, no triumph, just a raw truth that pierced Madison's heart more deeply than she could have anticipated. The reality loomed over her. This moment would eventually fade, the world would carry on, and the internet would soon latch onto a new spectacle. Scandal enveloped Lauren Mitchell, a weight she would carry for eternity. As she stepped into the secluded corridor, away from the prying eyes of the world, she felt the profound truth settle within her. This was not merely the conclusion of her career, but the shattering of the person she once was. The door clicked shut behind her, a soft yet definitive sound that sealed her off from the relentless cameras, the hushed whispers, and the silent stares that had haunted her since the moment she touched down. She exhaled sharply, her chest rising and falling in a tumultuous rhythm. The corridor was stark and cold, a stark contrast to the chaos she had just escaped. Out of, but it offered no comfort. No escape. Two security personnel flanked her as they led her through a quiet hallway, toward a small windowless office, the kind of room that wasn't meant for meetings, but for decisions, final ones. Madison's footsteps echoed softly against the tiled floor, each step a reminder of her isolation. The silence was suffocating, wrapping around her like a heavy shroud. She longed to speak, to voice her fears and plead for clarity, to cling to the remnants of her dignity, but the words felt like stones lodged in her throat. When they finally reached the office, one of the guards opened the door and gestured, the weight of the moment pressing down on her like an unrelenting storm. "Please come in and take a seat, Miss Keen." She paused for a moment, her fingers clutching the strap of her bag as if it were a lifeline, before finally stepping into the room. The office felt cold and sterile, a small space with a single desk, two chairs, and a landline phone that sat silently, untouched. There was no decoration, no hint of warmth, just a stark environment where devastating news was often shared. She settled into the chair, her back rigid, her heart pounding loudly in her ears. Then the door swung open once more, and a man in a dark navy suit entered. His face was a mask of unreadable emotions. Robert Langley, the senior director of airline compliance. Madison had encountered him before, mostly during corporate meetings where he spoke about policies with an air of authority. Updates and PR concerns weighed heavily on her mind, but she never envisioned finding herself in this moment, facing him like this. He settled into the chair across from her, adjusting his cuffs with a deliberate calm before placing a manila folder on the table. Her name was emblazoned on it, and Madison felt a lump rise in her throat. Daniel intertwined his fingers, locking eyes with her, and asked, "Miss Keen, Do you understand why you're here? She nodded, her heart racing, knowing it was because of the incident on the flight. Daniel paused, his expression unreadable, as he opened the folder, scanning the top document before continuing. Because of what happened on the flight, the public's reaction has been overwhelming, and it twisted her stomach in knots. It wasn't merely about her actions. It was about the eyes that had witnessed them. Daniel leaned in, his voice steady yet urgent. We've conducted a preliminary review of the incident, and I need to emphasize that this has escalated far beyond a simple passenger complaint. Madison's nails dug into her palms, a physical manifestation of her anxiety. The video of your interaction with Mrs. Hale has been viewed over 2 million times as of this morning. News outlets have already picked it up, and we've received over 800. In the last 6 hours, customer complaints have been filed against you. She gritted her teeth, feeling the weight of the moment. I didn't mean... Daniel raised a hand, silencing her. Your intent doesn't matter. This is about perception. This is about how the world views you. Madison sat stiffly, struggling to maintain a neutral expression as Daniel turned to another document. Furthermore, we've reviewed your past flight reports. While there are no official complaints against you, we discovered several instances of passenger discomfort stemming from your strict enforcement of... The seating assignments revealed a troubling pattern that sent Madison's heart racing. This was my responsibility. I uphold the policies. But Daniel's gaze pierced through her, and he asked, do you enforce them equally? She felt a chill as the question lingered, thick and oppressive. Daniel allowed the silence to stretch, then exhaled deeply, closing the folder with a weighty finality. Here's where we stand. The airline has made its decision. Madison's throat tightened as she braced herself. Effective immediately, your employment with the airline is terminated. The words struck her like a blow, and she blinked in disbelief, her stomach dropping. You're firing me? Daniel nodded, his voice steady as he delivered the crushing news. We are terminating your employment due to misconduct, the reputational damage inflicted upon the airline, and your failure to uphold our core values in treating customers with respect. Her hands tightened into fists, a wave of disbelief washing over her. This is absurd. I've dedicated a decade of my life to this company, always adhering to the protocols. But Daniel's expression remained unyielding. No, Miss King, you followed your own assumptions. The silence hung heavy in the air, suffocating. Then with a heavy heart, Daniel reached into the folder and slid a document across the table. This is your official termination paperwork. We have already processed your severance package. In just 2 weeks, your final paycheck will arrive. Madison's eyes fixated on the paper, her vision clouding as the weight of reality crashed down on her. This was truly happening. Daniel clasped his hands together, his voice steady yet cold. You have the option to appeal, but considering the public nature of this incident, I strongly advise you to think carefully about whether prolonging this process will bring you any advantage. Her throat tightened. He was urging her to walk away, not just from her job, but from the fight itself. Madison inhaled deeply, her heart racing as she desperately searched for words, anything that could alter this devastating outcome, but nothing came. Had lost Daniel stood there, buttoning his suit jacket, the weight of the moment heavy in the air. Security will escort you to collect your belongings. Your employee access has already been revoked, and just like that, it was all over. Madison remained silent, frozen in place, her gaze fixed on the paper before her as the final remnants of her career slipped away. With a deep breath, she moved slowly, deliberately, picking up the pen and signing her name. When she finally set the pen down, her hands were steady, but inside, everything was unraveling. Daniel nodded, taking the document. You're free to go, Miss Keene. Security moved closer, and Madison took a shaky breath, preparing to stand up for the final time as a flight attendant. With each slow step toward the door, her body felt heavy and numb. As she passed the security team and the uniformed employees who couldn't bear to meet her gaze, a deep sense of finality washed over her. There would be no turning back from this moment. Outside the airport, Eudora slipped into a waiting car, her eyes drifting to the window. She watched the relentless flashes of cameras still hovering around the terminal. a stark reminder of the world she was leaving behind. She had always longed for attention, yet never craved the spotlight. Now she found herself woven into a narrative far grander than her own existence. With a gentle sigh, she gazed out at the sprawling city beyond the airport, reflecting on the countless silent battles she had fought throughout her life. Today, for the first time, the world had truly heard her. If this story resonates with you, please show your support by hitting the like button and sharing your thoughts in the comments below. I would be thrilled to hear your perspective. And if you wish to experience more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, ensuring you never miss a moment. The story of Eudora and Madison teaches us that prejudice and disrespect can have serious consequences. Madison hastily judged Eudora based on her appearance, ignoring the evidence, which cost her her job and her reputation. The lesson is that treating everyone fairly, regardless of appearance or background, is the foundation of ethics and professionalism. Prejudice not only causes personal harm, but also erodes trust in communities. In today's American society, diversity is a core value, but prejudice still exists, especially in the service sector. The story reminds us to examine our personal assumptions and listen before we act. In the workplace, practicing respect and fairness helps build inclusive environments, reduce conflict, and enhance organizational reputation. In your daily life, practice empathy, avoid hasty judgments, and advocate for justice when you witness injustice. This not only strengthens relationships, but also contributes to an open society in line with the spirit of modern American culture, where people are judged on their true worth.